F1 in 2026 is well underway. As we speak, the cars are currently being launched and completing their initial rundowns, with pre-season testing fast approaching. But before all of that, I want to continue focusing on the current crop of drivers to decide the ultimate question. You see, we've already gone through who has the best driver lineup for 2026, so now I think the time is to debate who are the current 5 best drivers on the grid. As always, let me know your picks in the comments section. So without further ado, let's get underway. But being unconventional, I'm actually going to start with my number 1 pick. Well, because it's probably the most obvious of the lot. At number 1, the best driver in Formula 1. Come on, we all know who it is. It's Max Verstappen, of course. Who else was I going to pick? This guy is head and shoulders above the rest at this moment in time. I don't think there has been such a bigger gulf between the best driver and the rest of the grid since the days of Michael Schumacher. That's how good I rate Max right now. He is driving at such a high level, performing week after week, race after race. He really is driving in a league of his own. And that's not to say that the rest of the drivers aren't good enough. It's more of a compliment to Verstappen about how he is driving. Of course, he is a 4-time world champion already. He lost his crown just by the slenderest of margins last season, but he looked as though he was well out of it by the midway point when he was more than 100 points back. And yet somehow he only lost the championship by 2 points with that amazing run of form in the second half of the season. And that second half to 2025 epitomises Max's greatness. The fact that he came from absolutely nowhere, was completely out of the running for the title, and yet somehow managed to drag himself into contention and really pile the pressure on the 2 McLaren boys. And boy, did he put together a great run of form. I think it's fair to say that last year really was his best season, even though he didn't win the championship. It beats his 2023 season for me. That was all about dominance. 2025 was all about fighting spirits, never giving in, finding solutions to problems, and he managed to do that. And even though he didn't win the championship, I think that he won over many of the fans that had initially against some of his tactics and his behaviour on track. But overall, Verstappen, what a driver he has become. And the scary thing is, he's not even reached his peak yet. I think there's still more to come from him. And even though he won't be carrying the number 1 on his car this year, he for sure will be a contender if the Red Bull is competitive in this new era of regulations. And even if they start the season on the back foot, you can't write Max off. I think we've learned that from last year, haven't we? I've unveiled my number 1 already, so let's go in a more conventional order now, from 5 to 2. At number 5, I have gone with Oscar Piastri. This guy is a fantastic driver. He really showed his true colours last season, becoming a title contender in just his 3rd season and showing just why he is tipped to be a future world champion and why he is one of the most talked about drivers on the grid. Ultimately, it didn't go his way, but what a fantastic season anyway. I think you've still got to give him a lot of credit, particularly his first half of the season was mega. For me, the best driver in that first half of the year. 7 wins overall, multiple podiums, 5 pole positions as well. He really took it to both his teammate Lando Norris, but to also the other drivers. In the end, it was only that 6-race run where he had that uncharacteristic collapse, if you want to call it that, that cost him what would have been a deserved maiden championship. And the best thing is, he would have learned a lot from this. You know, although you could say that he bottled it, he still drove fantastically all year round. It was just that little blip that just dragged on far too long. If he'd been able to shake that off, I think he would have gone on to be the world champion, but it just wasn't meant to be. But you got to remember, it's only his 3rd season that he's just completed. He's going into his 4th season in 2026. His progression in each of his seasons in Formula 1 has been extraordinary. So if he takes that step again in 2026, I think we're looking at not only a title contender, I think we're looking at the champion in waiting. That's how good he is. But if McLaren are competitive again in these new regulations, I see no reason as to why Oscar won't be in the fight once again. We know that he's fast, extremely talented, very, very strong mentally. He's as cool as a cat. He just needs to iron out those cracks that are currently in his locker, and then you will have a much more polished Oscar Piastri in 2026, I believe. And someone who, if he did this debate again in 12 months' time, could very much find himself much further up the list. At number 4, sticking with McLaren, I've gone with Lando Norris. Of course, coming into 2026 as the new world champion, the reigning champion. He put together a fantastic season that did have its up and downs, but overall a fantastic season and a thoroughly deserving champion. 7 wins, 18 podiums. Really, if you look at the races where he didn't score points and the mistakes that he made, he really should have wrapped up the championship far earlier than he did, and he should have done it in a much easier fashion. In the end, he made it harder for himself, and I think McLaren had a part to play in that, with obviously the papaya rules and so on. But nevertheless, he got the job done and won the championship. So Norris goes into 2026 as the man to beat. But overall, even though he's got the number one on his car, he's not the number one on the track. There are no doubt still areas that he needs to improve and work on. It's amazing that Lando is now coming into his 8th season. It feels like he's barely been around, but he's actually been around for far longer than you might think. And yet, he's still so young. He's only 26 years old. So he's still got many more years ahead of him to further improve himself as a driver and make himself a more rounded driver, one that can be both exceptional in both race trim and over one lap in qualifying, and then improve on the finer little details such as wheel-to-wheel combat, racecraft adaptability and so on. Some could argue that maybe Lando wasn't as impressive as Oscar was last season. It's just that he was more consistent and didn't have as big a dip that Oscar did in that second half of the year. But Lando for me has to be placed ahead of Oscar, not just because he won the championship. I think overall he's still got that edge, certainly over one lap, and I think in race trim he again just has that small edge over Oscar when it really counts. Norris for sure is still prone to making too many mistakes, and that almost cost him. But now that he's a more experienced driver and he's got that championship under his belt, I think he's going to be potentially more potent, have much more confidence. He's going to walk into the paddock, shoulders back, feel 10 feet taller, knowing that he's achieved his childhood dream. So that could definitely rub off on his performances on track, and we could see a much more better Lando Norris in 2026. Moving into the top three, and at number 3, I've gone with George Russell. Now this may be a bit of a controversial choice to put ahead of a world champion in Lando Norris and maybe ahead of Piastri, but for me George Russell has to be ahead of these two guys, simply because last season not only was it his best season in Formula 1 to date, but it was a year in which George got everything out of the package that he had for 2025. He could not have done much more than he did. He consistently got the most out of his car. And let's not forget, he was the only driver outside of Verstappen, Piastri and Norris to win a Grand Prix. And the 2 times that Mercedes had the best car, he made the most of it. He got those 2 wins in Canada and Singapore. I thought over the course of the season he was fantastic, and he really stepped up to the plate. And let's not forget, he really did step up extremely well into the team leader role, which was vacated by Lewis Hamilton, who of course went to Ferrari. So I think there was a lot of pressure on George to show that he could step into that role, fulfill it and do a good job, and I think that all of us can agree he did just that. Of course last year wasn't perfect, but I think George is in a stage in his career where he is now ready to win a championship. He just needs the car to do it. He's driving better than ever. He just needs the tools to show that he can fight for a world championship and beat the best on the grid. We're of course all talking up Mercedes as the team to beat this season, because we're all expecting them to nail these new regulations, which are mostly invested on the engine, which we know from when the V6 engines came in 2014. Mercedes focused heavily on making sure that they had a competitive advantage over everybody at the start of those regulations, and all that hard work paid dividends. Their engine was so far ahead of everybody else's, extremely reliable, extremely powerful, and it took a while for the other engine manufacturers to catch them up. So everyone's expected that they're going to work their magic again and be the benchmark for everyone else to try and beat. Of course time will tell, but if Mercedes do in fact come up with a fantastic engine and a fantastic car for 2026, George is going to be without a doubt in the fight to win this world championship. He's many people's tips to be world champion this year, and I think it's hard to overlook that. So let's see if George Russell can live up to everybody's expectations. And so we arrive at number 2. Who is the final driver that has made this top 5 list? No, it is not Lewis Hamilton. No, it is not Fernando Alonso. It is Ferrari's Charles Leclerc, who for me has to be included on this list, and for me has been one of the best drivers on the grid for many years now. He is one exceptional talent, just waiting for the right car to try and fight and win a world championship. There's obviously been a frustrating few years for Charles at Ferrari, not having a car that can consistently fight for a title throughout a season. He also had that fantastic start to 2022 where he led the championship, was winning races, competing with Verstappen, and then it all just fell away, partly because of his mistakes on track, but most of all because Ferrari fell back in the development race. But I think that version of Charles Leclerc wasn't ready to fight for a world championship. What I've seen over the last few years when Ferrari hasn't been as competitive is a more rounded, more finesse version of Charles Leclerc, and somebody who is ready to take that step. It's now just a question of if he can be given a car that can show us that he is capable of contending for the World Championship. 2025 obviously was a difficult year for Ferrari overall, but for Charles, even though he experienced that pain of not being at the sharp end of the grid, he nevertheless, I think, in many ways overachieved. 7 podiums, that pole position in Hungary. He didn't win a race, but nevertheless, I think it was actually one of his better seasons, because more often than not, he got the most out of the package, and he completely destroyed his teammates in Lewis Hamilton. And speaking of teammates, Leclerc has not had it easy since he's gone to Ferrari, but he's beaten Vettel, he's beaten Sainz, and now he's beaten Hamilton. I don't think there's much more that he needs to prove as to why he's one of the top drivers in Formula 1. Previously, what I saw in Charles was a driver that was always on the edge, would often overdrive the car, and that's why we would see mistakes in qualifying, in the races. He's now got rid of that, and he's a much more refined driver, and we're seeing far less mistakes from him. That has obviously come with time and with age and more experience. It's now just a question of if he can be given a car to fight consistently for podiums, for victories, and obviously, as I keep mentioning, the championship. Even if qualifying was a struggle last year, that was more down to the car. I still think overall, if you were to put all the drivers in the same car, I think Leclerc would still be the best and the fastest over one lap. I still think he is the best qualifier on the grid. Sometimes his emotions do get the better of him, but nevertheless, that's more down to him just being extremely passionate, so motivated to help Ferrari, bring Ferrari back to the front of the grid and to be world champions once again. It's not going to be easy, we all know that, and we all fear that Charles' career is being wasted, especially as he enters the prime years of his career. But Ferrari has a chance to end this barren run without a championship that stretches all the way back to 2008 with these new regulations. Can they find something in the regulations that others haven't and work that to their advantage? Time will obviously tell. But nevertheless, for me, Leclerc is clearly best of the rest behind Verstappen among the current crop of Formula 1 drivers. Well, there you are guys, that is my current top 5 drivers in Formula 1 going into 2026. If you have liked this video, be sure to like it, and if you are new around here, please do subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.